Good evening, good afternoon, and if it is good morning to all of you here on Facebook, live on the ninth day of the ninth month. It is September 9th. Today, I wanted to start off with a question that we have. We actually have it on the chat, Kelly and Travis, and I'm hoping everyone is quite familiar with the panel by now. We have Eileen, who helps us stay cohesive, does an incredible job at it. Kelly, our Qigong teacher, and Travis, who we've met, who is a spiritual teacher in his own right. So welcome, Travis and Kelly and Eileen. We do have a question pending from 2 weeks back, so I will launch into that question. This was posted by Jody. It says, I'm curious how I reconcile morals and ethics with being judgmental. I find it important for my inner self to have a loving, gratitude-filled space around me, my home especially. In these crazy days, my friends have different opinions filled with bigotry and violence. I want none of that in my space. However, I am told that I'm being judgmental. Please help me understand. Kelly, you want to go first?
Sure.
Thank you.
This is a really good question. Really important question, because it brings up a key element of spiritual progression and spiritual awareness, or just, well, not even spiritual awareness, just the awareness of the difference between discernment and judgment. The difference between having violent thoughts, such as bigotry, and judgment in general is a violent action, a violent mental action. And one of the things that happens when you align more with yourself and actually develop ethics and principles, because this is what this is about, is actually having ethics and principles that support love and kindness and compassion, and to stop supporting judgment and bigotry and racism and elitism and all the other variations of judgment based in fear. My own experience has shown me that there is a very large, huge difference between actual heart-based discernment and the normal run-of-the-mill mental programming judgment, or people being judgmental. Because when we are slaves to our programming and our cultural and especially our family programming, this type of scenario really points to the kind of environment that we grew up in and the kind of programming that we are on the receiving end of as children, and the trauma that other people or ourselves will act through and from and upon without actually having discernment that that is what we are doing. And one of the simplest ways for the monkey mind or the ego to keep us in our programming is to continue to have us hooked into judgment. And again, it's like, well, but, it's just like things are either good or bad, or like, that person, committed a crime, so they're bad, or like, we have this type of mentality that everything is about the separation into good and bad. And in a certain context, absolutely. You want to have moral citizens. You want to have people who have morals and principles and ethics, and who understand how to live and how to treat their neighbors and themselves and their family and their friends. However, what happens is that from an ego perspective, the way that we stay in our programming is through judging ourselves through the reflection of judgment outside of us. So we learn as kids to judge things. And this is not discernment. This is just repetition. And we begin to accept as kids that this is normal. This is just how it is. This is, oh, that's bad. That's bad. You grow up believing that something is bad without actually having any discernment or understanding of, you know, the story behind that action or that event or that experience. And when we look inside and we begin to unravel our own conditioning and our own trauma and the spaces that we tell ourselves stories to continue supporting our ego validation and continue supporting our anger, our anxiety, our fears, and our judgments, to separate ourselves from other people. I mean, that's what judgment is really about, is separating ourselves from other people and separating ourselves from our hearts, separating ourselves from ourselves so that we are not listening to anything other than that robot programming of judgment. So this question, in my mind, in my understanding, speaks directly to the difference between discernment when you are in your heart and you no longer believe in the fear and the anxiety and the violence of judgment, and you want to actually support communication and you want to support understanding and you want to support allowance and acceptance of reality of others and others' experiences without judgment. You begin to actually discern the difference between being in judgment and being in separation from your heart, and being in your heart and understanding and allowing and accepting and being grateful for the opportunity to learn and to have an experience of someone else's information connecting with you and sharing with you and being in a space of sharing and non-judgment and non-violence. And to me, this has actually been a huge, huge key for understanding my own journey away from judgment and fear and anxiety and anger, because I was an angry kid. I was a really angry kid. And learning how to actually love myself and be grateful for the experiences I have had in my life because of how strong they've actually made me and the gifts of understanding that they have actually given me. Instead of like judging myself, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. It's like the past does not exist unless we are holding on to it. Being in the present, being in our hearts, and letting ourselves feel the space of non-judgment and non-violence especially really changes everything, because it is, for me, understanding that there is a space of non-violence that I could actually have in my head, and realizing how violent my judgmental thoughts, my anger, and my fear actually was against me, was the big thing that really changed my whole perspective on why I should not be judgmental, why I should stop accepting judgmental people and judgments and that kind of violence in my life, and actually have that kind of principled living. So to me, huge difference between discerning heart space and being programmed and mentally judgmental and in your mental programming, in your family, cultural, societal programming of something's good or bad. When you're in your heart, it's either love or fear. You understand the good and bad aspects, not as separate, but as the same coin, different aspects of love and fear. And you still understand, okay, that was a crime. That was awful. Good and bad still exist. But for me, there's this deeper understanding of, well, that happened. That was really, really unfortunate. Really, really unfortunate. Sad that, this experience could happen. Or, wow, that was amazing. Going to a wedding and seeing everyone full of joy. So again, the discernment between fear and love is really, really important. And I firmly believe that when you are actually listening to your heart and aligning and stepping away from the fear programming, especially judgmental conversations or people who are exceptionally judgmental, they will turn that on you and call you judgmental when you actually step away from that space. And it's a classic twist to verbally and emotionally manipulating other people to convince them that you are actually doing the bad thing by changing. And this is one of the things that I've experienced, that when I've actually changed, I've stopped being judgmental and I've stopped being angry the way people, you know, used to expect me to be angry. People would try, my friends and people that I knew would try and get me to hook back into the same kind of judgmental conversation, the same kind of angry conversation, or the same kind of fear conversation that I used to partake in when I was in those spaces. There's lots more that I could keep going, but I'll just lean, you know, it's a good question. It's a huge pivotal thing. So
what I heard you say is a lot of it, the judgment, our ability to judge is more a past conditioning from our culture, from our upbringing, family that we live in.
Yep.
That's one part to it. And
Yep.
then use discernment when the life situation arises. So,
yes, yeah, being in observation, being the observer of our thoughts and everything like that. That is the discernment.
And come back to alignment.
Yep.
Thank you. Travis, anything come up for you regarding, I'll have to read it again. Something about, I'm told that I'm being judgmental. Please help me understand.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. I really agree with a lot of what you're saying there. And I think that it is a great question, because I feel like we're living in a time where I think it's pretty clear to a lot of us that there's kind of heightened agitation and polarization, you know, in the US, in the world. And so I think it's something that speaks to something very, very real for a lot of us. And so I think that if we can get down to the essence of what's going on here, it could be possibly very useful for a lot of people. And so what comes up for me is, so there's two things that, and again, I'm kind of in a way paraphrasing or parroting what Kelly was saying, is just that there's what comes from the outside. There are social agreements and kind of collective ways of seeing things that are imposed upon us as we enter into the world. And so, and I think it's really important to be able to discern that from an indicator or something that comes up from within us that helps us decide for ourselves in each unique instance that we enter into in life, what is right for that instance. And so I think the more that we can look inside of ourselves and get in touch with life, the more we can be ready and available to meet each unique life circumstance that comes to us spontaneously and appropriately. And so for myself, if I can, I like to rely on that more, because I don't think society collectively is as of yet in a place of deep wisdom where it's able to, it does offer wisdom, it does offer guidance. There's a lot of useful stuff there, but I think sometimes the deepest and most powerful ways to respond to situations are still relatively uncommon. So a lot of times, if we can access that from within and bring that into the world, will help to change that collective social fabric. And so just being able to discern from what comes up from within and what comes to us from society. And for me, I mean that, there's Jesus's final words, right? When he was on the cross and couldn't quite understand what he was having to go through in that moment. And then it dawned upon him and he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And I know Eckhart Tolle talks about that a lot. And in his words, you know, in a more contemporary way of putting it, it's to say that it's unconscious. So nobody, if they're really present and really aware, nobody would do something that is going to be to the detriment of all, including themselves, because everything affects everyone in that way. So I think when we can find ourselves in that place of forgiveness and compassion, and not need somebody to act gracefully or graciously for us to act graciously, but not need for them to act in a way that is kind and understanding, for us to act in a way that is kind and understanding, but instead to, I think, find that deeper kind of spiritual maturity, where we can, that's a big mantra for me lately, is just modeling exemplary behavior, because that's how we learn. We learn through mirror neurons. We mimic one another. And so if we can behave in a way that honors one's choice, because we all have our own choice, we all have our own space, we all have our own freedom. And if we can say, I respect that that's your space to choose to do that, to see things that way, to act in that way. And of course, sometimes if somebody's acting in a way that is very extreme, you might need to put up some very hard boundaries very fast. There are situations like that for sure. But again, just being more in touch will help us to be able to do that in creative and spontaneous way and appropriate ways. But to be able to be loving, to be able to be kind, and that way we're bringing that into the world. We're showing through our behavior how it's done, and so I think that it's not. It can be a great challenge to find that space, but I think that the reward is no less than the challenge, is at least as great as the challenge. So when we do find ourselves in that space, because there's immediate peace, there's immediate space, there's an immediate benefit that one can feel when they find themselves in that place where they can allow others to be, even with their shortcomings or their oversights. And so I guess I'll leave off there. I think those are the reflections that come up for me around that.
I love the fact that you talk about forgive them for they know not what they do, for their unconsciousness. So there's this video on the website, I don't know if it's on YouTube yet, of a mother asking Eckhart. Her teenage daughter passed away, and the mother is saying, how can I forgive myself for being a bad mother? Like, she realizes now with Eckhart's teachings, of course, she realizes that she was a bad mother, and he's walking her through having compassion for her unconsciousness. Forgive yourself, for you know not what you do, right? And your daughter still loved you. You don't know it, but your daughter loved you, even though she passed away. So he brings up this beautiful way of talking. And this is what people don't understand is Eckhart, every word that Eckhart speaks is non-polarity. There is no polarity, there's no judgment. And he like what Travis was saying, he exemplifies how do you speak and vibrationally hold non-polarity, right? So he talks about his father. He said, as a child, he had great resentment for his father, to the extent that one day he dreamed of cutting his father into small pieces and putting him in a bag and stuffing the bag under his bed. This is Eckhart Tolle as a child, like a 9-year-old boy or 8-year-old boy. And he said, as his father walked into the home, he went and gave him a hug. That's the paradox, right? Here you're dreaming of cutting him up because his father had a violent temper. And because of his violent temper, he was like a powder keg. When would he go off and the violence erupt? And the joke is, he says, my mom knew exactly what buttons to push. Then she would say, and Eckhart said he would cringe the moment certain words came out of his mother. He knew his father would go off, right? But what I saw of him was, as he's recounting that, he goes, I understand that my father was like the seventh child or eighth child, an unwanted child, right? He was born accidentally. And then his grandfather, so father's father, passed away when the father was 15 years old. And they let the women, the sisters, the 6 sisters, stay in private school and paid their tuition, but he was asked to leave school and go get an apprenticeship and maybe earn for the family, right? So his father had great violent temper towards women, and he used women. He was a womanizer. So then Eckhart goes through that, recounting that. He goes, I understand from all that beginnings of my dad, I understand why he was so unconscious, why he had that violent temper. So forgive them. That's how I forgive. I know as a child I had resentment for him, but I totally forgive him. And you have to forgive yourself. So that non-polarity of, even when he talks about his father, he doesn't say, my father was this way. He says, my father's ego. Right? So he realizes it's just an egoic pattern. I love how he exemplifies speaking the non-polarity, the non-judgmental way of saying the words, even though he's recounting the story. It's like totally facts, very neutral facts. Facts are always neutral, right? He doesn't say, oh, he caused me so much trauma. I had existential, what is it called? Anxiety when I was a child. None of that. It was just like plain facts. This is what my father went through, and this is what made him unconscious. So beautiful. And he epitomizes that we can live in that non-polarity of our words and vibrational energy. Like Kelly was saying, alignment. When Kelly says align with your heart, it means align with your inner beingness, right? Know from deep within, are you going to say bigotry? Are you going to, the moment you say, let me read the words, bigotry and violence, the violence is within you, right? And that's what Kelly and Travis are saying. The word started with you, and that's why they are telling you you're being judgmental. Because the moment you label somebody that they had bigotry and violence, you've judged them. So that's where they're actually telling you, they're your greatest spiritual teachers. And Eileen will know, I always say, you don't forgive it, it'll come back around. What goes around comes back around. You don't let go of this, another person will tell you that you're judgmental. A fifth person will tell you, these two or four people may not tell you that you're judgmental, but the universe, if we don't learn the lesson keeps coming back, and other people will tell us that we are judgmental, right? So look at it. Are we being, the other thing I've noticed is initially when we are just on the spiritual path, I feel we get into this mindset of, oh, I'm better than the other, right? I know what presence is, or I know what present moment centeredness is, so I'm better than the other. And so we may unknowingly, not like saying, I am going to judge the other, unconsciously, we are trying to separate, the ego loves its enemies. we learned yesterday in Travis's meditation, feel your one. That's what shared presence is, right? The oneness. So, Arlene, anything come up with for you on the judgment?
A couple of things.
Thank you.
I know that one thing that came up while Poonam was talking, and I think it actually came up with Kelly was talking also, was that when, because I think you both brought up, you know, forgiveness in some way, and without doing so, I feel like the only thing you bring on is more suffering. And so it's like people, others can be making poor choices or whatever it is, but then you judging that and not accepting it and letting it go then brings on more suffering for you. And so it's almost like you're tormenting yourself, is what ends up happening. Something else that came up, I have a quote that's written on my my laptop, and it says, "I never stop learning because life never stops teaching." And I feel like that's also part of it. It's like all of these things are happening for a reason. And then it's like knowing that you need to be grateful for all of it, whether it's good or bad or positive or negative, because even the things that are happening that you may be judging as unexpected or negative in some way are there to teach a lesson. Now you might need to get taught that lesson many, many, many times before you get it. So there might be a lot of suffering before you get there. But yeah, that definitely came up for me.
Thank you, Arlene. And if anybody thinks that Eckhart is not being presented with lessons, he is at that peak of spiritual excellence. Just look at all the events that got canceled this year. He is not, it sounds true, and Eckhart are not making any money this year unless they do a virtual event, because all the in-person events have been canceled. Right, Arlene? Your Boston event got postponed to 2021?
Yeah, it went from June to October and now next June. Mm-hmm.
Right. So he's been, talk about state of acceptance, because they had planned Phoenix like sometime in April, and all the way there was something in Hawaii, and then the Boston one, and it's all canceled or postponed until next year. So he's been presented the greatest state of acceptance, him and Sandra. So thank you. Lakshmi asked, my question is, did Eckhart dissolve some of the karma of his parents? Are their subsequent lifetimes be a little easier? Eckhart had thoughts about killing his father first. I've heard about this. Sorry, I tried to catch as much as I could.
That was Zachary. Sorry, it was, the name was cut off below.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Eckhart had thoughts about killing his father. And that's the paradox, right? The epitome of spirituality, and he did as a child. So Lakshmi's question is, my question is, did Eckhart dissolve some of the karma of his parents? Are their subsequent lifetimes going to be a little easier? Travis, you want to start?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's always interesting for me. Here for a minute, my internet connection sometimes is a little weird, but so it's always funny for me talking about karma, and I'm I feel as though I'm nudged to trust my own my own gut around this. Is that so that there is an implication in karma because there's sequence, right? And so it creates time because this happens, and then as an effect, subsequently, this next thing happens. And the way people look at karma is, and then that, and then that, and then that, and it's this long chain that goes on and on and on. And when does it end? When does karma end? When is one free from karma? Now. Is the exact, the precise moment when one is free of karma is now. It's never, you are closer to freedom from karma now than you will be in the future. And so and again, I'll go back to kind of referencing Eckhart. Is I hear him say things, he says, stop creating more time. He says, if you need more time, then you'll get more time. That's exactly what you'll get if you need more time. So if Eckhart's parents need more time, they'll get more time. I think Eckhart came to a place within himself where he needed to be free from time. And it's so much so that it kind of exploded, and that time-bound self kind of died or dissolved, and he was left primarily, or maybe totally, or I don't know, because I still feel like I toggle between being a time-bound self and experiencing the timelessness of who I am, the timeless dimension of who I am. So, so what comes up for me is now. My answer to the question around karma is it's a reminder for me to bring my attention back to right now. And worship the now, bow before the now, pay homage to that which is now. And that's the only way to break the bonds of karma. And so that being said, perhaps it's each our own responsibility to do that. I mean, even if and any great spiritual teacher doesn't have to be Eckhart Tolle in particular, but they might be able to show the way, point the way, even lead you to the gate. But you have to walk through that gate on your own, I think. I really think that's true. So, and that's that because that's the reward, and it's what an impeccable design where nobody could take that away from you. Just think if somebody could do it for you, they would be taking it. They would be taking the greatest. You have to take that step. Just think if that would be, the universe would be a little bit less awesome if somebody else could take that step for one of us. But it's designed in such a beautiful, impeccable way where nobody can take that away from us. And in that way, that responsibility gets put on each of us, I think. So if that helps to answer that question, but that's what comes up for me. So thanks.
Thank you, Travis. I think Lakshmi has asked this question before.
I thought so too, but
I think 2 or 3 weeks back she asked. So she's talking about some ancestral, we all carry ancestral karma within us. So if we work enough, does it help our parents? So Travis is saying, to recap, all we can do is work on one, ourselves, and make sure we are in the now. We are bringing as much consciousness and burning our karma up, and that's all that matters. Whether I'm healing my ancestral karma or the city's karma, the country's karma, it doesn't matter. In this moment, when I'm in the now, I am healing the one consciousness. I'm not just healing ancestral or city or country. In this whole existence, I'm healing the pattern, right? That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that wisdom. So that's the power that all of us have in this present moment. Kelly, anything come up for you? I'm sure with all the Eastern philosophies, you have a lot to say about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Poonam. Well said, Travis. Karma for me has been an interesting concept. The reason why being in the now is so incredibly important is because when you are actually present and you are in the now and you are detached from the past and the future and you are in your heart and you are aligned, your mind is still, your energy is still. So you're not creating new karma, you are aligned with your heart and you are not creating anything other than alignment. This is why being in the now is really, really important. The concept of karma, huge ball of wax, huge football. For me, understanding karma boiled down to being still in my mind, quieting the monkey mind, disciplining myself so that I could see the duality in my mind, in my monkey mind, the swing of the pendulum between extreme emotional states, which is what creates karma, and the belief in those emotional states, which reinforces the karma. So if we are swinging back and forth and we're not centered, we keep creating energy back and forth, over and over and over again. And this is the wheel of karma. And again, I'm paraphrasing this. This is, from all the Buddhist studies, the Taoist studies, the First Nation information and other stuff. This is super, super condensed and basic. Being present, being emotionally responsible with our awareness is what changes karma. Karma has everything to do with how we use our awareness. This has been my experience. Stepping out of the duality of the extreme emotional swing, not just inside ourselves, but also connecting outside of ourselves with events outside of ourselves. Stopping that need to hook into something outside of ourselves to validate ourselves is something that helps understand our karma and our attachment, our ego attachment to the outside world and how we validate our own ego identity through the outside world. Being able to feel that by being present, being able to be still, being able to be aligned with our heart helps us actually feel the emotional swings and what our mind does and how our body responds. Through my practice, my personal practice, I have learned that there's a profound correlation for myself and for people that practice Qigong in my classes and who have spent enough time, they begin to feel the impact their thoughts actually have on their bodies and how it triggers their emotional energy and their emotional states to swing in one direction or the other. This is why I love teaching what I teach and sharing what I do and talking about this with people who are interested in listening and understanding this. So the short answer to Lakshmi's question, yes, she did ask this a couple weeks ago. The short answer is yes. If you are working on yourself and being still and centered and aligned with your heart, the ripple effect goes out through your entire family because you're connected by blood. People will change and you will not have to say anything. They will have their own choice to face their trials, their emotional energy in one form or another, whether it's through conversation or being unbalanced and having disease come up, to face their fears of feeling themselves. And it is when we begin to actually go inside and feel ourselves, we can stop the extreme emotional swings and stop our monkey mind from hijacking us, and we can feel ourselves be more present, be more aligned with our hearts and more in our hearts, so that we are actually stopping our minds, stilling the agitation in our nervous system so that we do not react from just programming. We become aware of the impact things are having on us mentally and emotionally, so that we step into the observer position. We observe our thoughts, we observe our emotions, we observe our feelings. And we align with that space of observation, which stills the outside, the connection to the outside world and our connection inside. So we build this balance. So Lakshmi, yes, absolutely. If you are working on yourself, anyone who is working on themselves, and sometimes it feels like years and years and years go by without anything happening, the more you work, the more momentum you build for yourself and everyone that you're connected with. And this is how love works. It's a beautiful thing. It's an absolutely wondrous, beautiful reality of how love actually works. Loving kindness and actually self-love. Why self-love really is important in terms of going inside, accepting ourselves, being grateful for all of the things that have created us, our parents, our family, our friends, all of the things. And sometimes this is really hard, being able to go through your life and actually express gratitude. And I've had to force myself to look at some hard situations, go and see what it is that I actually learned about myself in those situations, because I was so judgmental about what had happened and had such a hard time actually seeing the lesson or feeling the new space that I actually created for myself, where I was stronger in myself and in my alignment with my heart, and how much stronger and more capable and how much more capacity I had for being emotionally, mentally, spiritually present. I'll just restrain myself from more, because again, it's a topic that I love, because again, this is a very pivotal understanding of how the actual mechanics of reality work. Loving ourselves is a real thing.
Thank you,
Being
Kelly.
grateful for ourselves is a real thing.
So what I heard Kelly say is it's more like a measurement of how much karmic content do we have in our vibrational energy, the emotional swings, right? You see President Trump say something, what is your emotional swing?
Right.
Right? So if you get out of your body and you're about to react to whatever he says, right?
Exactly.
You're creating karma. At that moment, you've created karma.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And that action will bring out a reaction. Then another person, like we've been talking since the beginning,
yep.
that because we created that karma, it was our vibrational state that created it. And our emotions are a great measure. Are we on this pendulum of loving kindness, compassion, unconditionally loving what is, to here, move through the pendulum of reactivity,
yep.
to anger, to resentment, to grievance, holding a grievance, rage,
Mhm.
right? Rage is deep-seated hatred, is like that other extreme.
Yep.
So we want to be here, is what I heard Kelly say. That's how you, if every present moment you can unconditionally love President Trump, the president of the Philippines, no matter how many people he's killing, you can love, who's the North Korea president, Kim Jong-un,
Yep.
or Gil, whoever it is. If you can understand, have the compassion for the understanding of why they exist. Why does that so-called, what we may label as evil, exist? Right? Have the compassion for that. When you are at that point, then you're burning your karma. If not, you're not burning. If you're reacting, then you're not burning your karma. You're not in the present moment. You're not generating enough consciousness, right? So your emotional field is be at that state of loving kindness. And the present moment and the news, as you open the news, is a great starter to know what vibrational state are you in, right? Mass shootings.
One more thing.
Go ahead. Thank you.
And thank you very, very well. Good job paraphrasing.
Summarizing it.
Summarizing everything. For me, when I began to understand how effective and that stilling the mind and quieting the mind and stopping that emotional swing actually worked, I started using everything as research, everything as an educational opportunity to see what would happen, like how I would react, how, like, would I get emotional, would I get triggered, would I like lose my stuff and like want to go break things, you know? So that's what happened with me when I began to understand that, yeah, that's a real thing and it works. And that, yeah, as you said, you don't want to be in the emotional swing. But when I realized that actually stilling the mind worked and that being present and being in the now was a real thing, I started looking at everything as research.
Like you hear one of your loved ones, right? Like maybe it's your child or your grandparent or your parent, something is happening to them, right? Like a challenging life. I love Eckhart's non-polarized. Today's lesson will be non-polarized speaking. He just calls it a life situation. He doesn't say it's a bad, horrific, traumatic, blah, blah, blah. It's just a life situation. So your child is going through a life situation. What is your reaction? Are you still in that loving kindness, or are you in distress? Now you're losing it, right? You're creating, the moment you come from, you're not at that anchored in the loving kindness, compassion, you're creating karma.
Yep.
Right? So test it out. Imagine your child going through something, and what is my emotional state? What is my vibrational state? Can I be rooted in my inner beingness? Can I feel the anchor? And that's why yoga and qigong help so much, because they anchor you inside your body, like you're totally in the standing state, which Kim Ing calls the bamboo, like you're hollow like a bamboo. And she says, just feel it, the emptiness of the bamboo inside, right? And you're rooted in that. And that's it. No matter what's going on.
That's right.
No matter with a hurricane, now you're having an earthquake. A lot of you, Lakshmi lives in California like you, Travis. So earthquakes, right? For us, we are living in Texas, so tornadoes. Within seconds, the weather changes and everybody is in panic mode. And it's within seconds, right?
There was no sun here today. It was the strangest day. I woke up at like 3:30 I just woke up, so I decided to meditate, and it just never became daytime all day.
Why?
Because of the fires.
Oh,
And there's all this,
I'm
and
so
you have
sorry.
the fog layer, and there's all this smoke, and it looked like a Blade Runner or something. It looked like a dystopic future movie. It was the strangest, weirdest day. And I saw mice out. I think even nocturnal animals, I don't think they realized it was daytime. It was, anyways, just had to share. So weird.
Exactly. You're in the middle of the fires. Are you rooted?
Right.
Like,
right.
you're
Well, I
inhaling the
appreciate
smoke.
this. This helps keep me rooted. So thank you guys. It's definitely an interesting day.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing another life situation, as Eckhart's life situation, as Eckhart calls it. Yeah. I love that man. He is incredible. Eileen, anything come up for you as far as karma and
nothing additional that I didn't talk about the last time, but I did want to note that Lakshmi said thank you to Kelly. She says, now I completely got it. So good.
So actually, Jason, I'm gonna move to, I'll come back to the karma, but Jason says, does anyone know where one might find a conscious dating partner? It seems so very rare to find anyone who's awake. Travis, you want to take that?
Sure. This is a fun question. I'm a huge fan of romance and romantic relationships. As I have an Eckhart Tolle kind of book on tape or talk, and what is it called? It's Enlightened Relationships, and the subtitle is The Ultimate Training Ground for Practicing Presence, or something. Sounds like you're getting in the ring. I mean, so enter if you dare, but I can share my experience because I think this is what for one, throughout my 20s I didn't date a whole lot. I was very shy, had a hard time knowing I didn't really know who my tribe was. I hadn't found a meditation community. And then once I did, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to be around these people. They're passionate about the same things as me. And so for me, that was a huge way to meet people, meet women that have a similar core values, which is so important to me, and instantly provides something to relate over that really matters a lot to you. So I mean, the question is, if you're looking for a conscious dating partner, I'd say, it wouldn't hurt to roll in circles where there are people who are interested in understanding themselves on a deeper level in life and who we are on a deeper level in whatever form that takes. And so as long as it's congruent with what your own personal spiritual path and is authentic for you, if you can find ways to meet people that way, that's huge. Nowadays, it's harder because I'd say go online. But I know for me, it was really a funny thing where I was living here in the Bay Area, and I had dated quite a bit throughout my 30s, and had some very powerful and very meaningful and very just wonderful connections that helped me grow a lot. But it was funny. I had a point where there was actually a line that really stuck with me of Eckhart's teaching, where he says, you attract and manifest whatever corresponds to your inner state. And I actually made a little screensaver and put it on my phone, you know, so I'd see that as a reminder for a while. And that was when I moved out. I realized that it's all about where I'm at within myself on some level, some deeper level. And I moved to the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. Just nothing around, hardly anything around. And almost right away, met someone, and no one around there, who I connected with on a far deeper level than anyone I had before. So it was kind of because I think in many ways, because I had come to that deeper place within myself, that I was able to be met in that way, even in the middle of nowhere, even when all of the statistical odds were not in my favor to meet somebody. So I would say spiritual community in whatever form resonates with you, but perhaps even more so, finding one's own peace inside of themselves, their own inner resolve, loving who you are, loving being alone, just you know, becoming more rooted in a deeper place within oneself. I think that quite likely could help a lot in attracting the kind of partner that you are seeking, if that's in the cards.
That's the key.
Yeah, because I don't really know exactly how fate and destiny work. It's all a big mystery to me. It probably always will be on some level, and you know, so
I feel it's a conditioned pattern that human beings think that. Travis, you had brought it up once in one of the Facebook Lives that we are one half of a whole, right? We are either male or female. That's what even Eckhart says. So there's always a yearning to have the second half, right? Mm-hmm. That's inborn in us. But who's to say that that is needed? And your present moment is determining what is your present moment. Your present moment, if you don't have a relationship, then that means you're not supposed to have a relationship at this present moment. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have it a month from now, or a year from now, or a few years from now. But for this present moment, acceptance. So master chapter 8, 9, 10 of The Power of Now, chapter 8 being enlightened relationships, right? So how does your relationship fulfill you? What does Eckhart say? 3 failed relationships will teach you more than actually having a successful, like just living out a relationship, like compromising, you know, just going through the mechanics of having a relationship. So that's a great lesson. Thank you, Travis, for sharing that. Kelly, off to you, sir.
Such a great topic. There are a few angles that I could come at this with, but finding a person outside of ourselves that is awake. Again, Travis, I totally agree with everything that you said. Well said. I fully agree with you that it has everything to do with the space that we are carrying in our hearts, and where we are at emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and the universe will provide. I mean, I love the fact that you said, well, I moved out into the middle of nowhere, and, you know, the universe went, ole, okay, let's go, you know. I spent 11 years in a failed relationship, revisiting over and over and over and over again the same ground. So I gave myself a very thorough repetition of the learning process. And once I reclaimed my strength and got out of that space of seeking in someone else what I knew was inside of me, I found myself with amazing people around me. I'm getting all teary-eyed here. I feel absolutely blessed to have had, I mean, that was 10 years ago. I feel absolutely blessed to have had that thorough a failed relationship. I kid you not, to this day, my gratitude just keeps getting deeper for having had so many failed relationships, and then having 11 years of, you know, just smashing my head against that brick wall to educate myself. Now, I'm not saying that that's everyone's process, everyone's experience, or everyone's journey or path. Definitely mine. After that, however, I found people in my life that were exactly who I felt should be in my life. I knew that there was a soul connection, a love connection, whatever you want to call it. I have friends that I know I have a soul connection with, that I have incredible, intimate connections with, that I'm able to talk to about this awareness journey. And I am, you know, in the Chinese martial arts, they talk about how you have to taste the bitter before you taste the sweet. You have to learn before you understand. And that applies to everything in life as far as I'm concerned, especially when it comes to finding someone who, outside of us, a relationship that complements the space that we're in, and understanding why we are who we are and why this person is in our life. I now find myself in a relationship and with friends who perfectly mirror the development that I have given myself, and who appreciate the journey as well. Hard one, my experience, but the gratitude that I feel for the space that I'm in now, because I have gone through that and given myself that understanding. Yes, the relationships will always be the perfect arena for personal development, because all of your stuff will get thrown right back at you, whether you want it or not. And whether or not you're learning it or not. And that was the big thing for me. It was when I began to accept, okay, we're in the same place again. I haven't learned this yet. What the heck? Then things just would just flip and flip and flip. Get into the same situation, I'd be like, oh, I know this theme song. Oh, okay, wait a minute. What is it? Oh, there's this space that I'm not looking at. Okay, let's look at it. You know, like, keep the eyes open. It's like, I don't want to do this. But the learning and waking up to the learning, the most precious gift ever, no matter what. So, you know, Jason, go out and find someone to have a relationship with. Learn that connection.
And have the heart to fail.
Exactly. Oh yeah. And
be ready, be vulnerable, let it break. Yep. I am totally okay with my heart breaking, that person running away, having an affair, having a body attack, whatever they're going to have. I'm okay with it. When you're at that state, you will invite somebody in. Because one thing is if we have a pain body and you attract out of the vibrational frequency, we attract another pain body, you're going to end up, I mean, you're sparing yourself right now with not having a relationship, you're sparing yourself from another pain body. So observation, like Kelly was saying initially when we started, observe your mind, observe your vibrational emotional state. Know, do I have a pain body? Why am I going to invite another person? I'm going to anyway invite, because of the law of attraction, conscious manifestation, I'm going to invite another pain body. And then they're throwing things at us, right? Eckhart actually said that Socrates, or a parallel Greek philosopher, had a very unconscious wife and used his wife for his spiritual growth, right? So are you ready for that, Jason? Are you ready to have a unconscious, so when you're ready for that, then you will go out and find a partner, right? Anybody will be okay when you're ready for that. Then anybody will be okay. And the moment you say, I'm not finding a partner, I'm not finding a partner, that's what you're manifesting. Vibrationally, you're telling the universe, I am not finding. What Travis may have done in New Mexico is he would have opened up and said, I don't care if I meet somebody or not. And that's the invitation from the universe. Here's your prize.
Yeah.
Here's your partner.
And I'm not with that person now. So,
but they were, right?
Yeah.
It's some ex-partner. Here's your ex-partner.
Yeah. But it was one of those things where it was so, I mean, I've never had something so wonderful. I've also I've never had anything fall apart in like this massive orchestrated sort of way where you just go, what is happening, so but it's been honestly, I haven't even digested it fully yet. I'm supposed to be alone right now, I know that, and I'm grateful. This is part of my process right now. I got a bunch of big stacks of homework sent home with me, so I'm still working through it all.
New Mexico, I think, is Santa Fe in New Mexico?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there a Vedantic, there's a person in Santa Fe that runs a Vedantic school. So there may be people that are highly awakened in that area, because if he's running the school, somebody's attending the school, right? So I've heard some of his lectures. He is beautiful as a human being, just like Sadhguru. Like, I can take it, little doses of Eastern philosophy, not a whole bunch, but it's weird. So I'm East Indian, but I'm attracted to a German who teaches nothing about, his philosophy is East Indian, kind of like a mix of Buddhism, Eckhart teaches, but it's weird. Like, I never get attracted to, okay, I'm gonna go focus on some East Indian person and just follow that East Indian person. I don't know why. I can never get, I can take them in small doses, but not more than small doses. Weird. I see Vlad yesterday was saying something about reading the Hanuman Chalisa, which I've not read Hanuman Chalisa, so it's like,
either have I. Yeah, for me, it's come through, kind of just through association. People have been around, and I appreciate all of it, though.
It's like different strokes for different folks, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Eileen, anything come up for you as far as conscious relationship? How would he attract?
Well, when I first read his question to bring it over, I was kind of had to hold in laughing myself, because I've learned, thanks to Poonam, and I understand it now, but didn't before, that it's those relationships that are our greatest spiritual teacher. And so, like, the relationship that I have here, like, that is constantly teaching me something. It's like, and sometimes I'll message Poonam or send her a text message and be like, I thought I was past this. Why is this happening again? And it always comes from that one. And I'm like, it's always teaching me something. But then it's always like teaching me something about myself. But so that was one thing that came up for me, was the spiritual teacher in relationships. But then something else that came up for me was something that I'm going through over the last few weeks. It's that idea that you're going through this journey, like this enlightenment and awakening journey, and you get to a point where you're like, all right, I thought I was there, I'm not there. Okay, let's move this along, kind of a thing. And so you like put it out into the universe that you're like seeking an acceleration in this process. And then you get a ton of lessons all at once, which is what I've been dealing with for like the last 14 days. And so when I guess it's just, you have to be careful what you wish for, because sometimes those lessons that you need, that you're not necessarily aware of, they'll come and they'll all come at once. And so I think that relationships are one of probably the biggest ways that we end up having those lessons. And so those were two things that came up for me.
I like that analogy or that example, Eileen, because it's like some people, some of the spiritual teachers in India, or somebody on a spiritual seeker, I should say, not a teacher, but a seeker, they'll do the bed of nails, or they'll create some kind of challenge for themselves, right? To accelerate exactly what you're saying. And they may succeed, they may not succeed. So be careful for what you ask for. Kim Ng was pretty unconscious for Eckhart to have a, so he's used her as, or she's used him as her greatest spiritual teacher, because she's talked a lot about having a pain body attack, right? Several times with him. So
I think when you finally get to a point where you truly accept whatever comes your way and are grateful for it, which is where I am right now, trying, then it's like, then you will attract what it is that maybe is, you know, meant for you, and that peacefulness, or someone who's in that same space as you, or maybe that person becomes what it is you're seeking, you know, which is kind of the process that we're in right now, because things are changing. But I have to laugh, because
or you could be that extreme in your spiritual practice that you give up looking for a partner. You say,
yeah,
I don't need a partner. I do that. My spiritual practice is much more important to me than all the trying to have a relationship and maintaining a relationship. Right? We're creating karma there too. Let's tie all this back together. Right? Okay, so let's look at this. Zachary says, Kelly, what exactly do you teach? Was curious if it was spiritual or something more superficial, because I remember you mentioned you train martial arts. Zachary is asking.
Beg your pardon, is he still here, or is he, do we know?
Is Zachary still here?
Oh.
We can
respond. I'm looking to
They can watch it on the recording.
Sure, and I can track.
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay, excellent. Zachary, I teach several things. I teach Qigong and meditation and martial arts. However, the primary martial art that I've focused on the last 20 years is called Bagua Zhang. And Bagua is a pure Taoist art designed around a meditation practice called circle walking. And it is a very high level Qigong or Neigong art designed to awaken deeper aspects of awareness. As well as being a very effective martial art, it is one of the most profound spiritual arts I have actually trained in. And the Qigong that I teach, the standing stake, in of itself is very, very deeply spiritual, because it will force you to look at all of your stuff by being still, physically present with yourself. It has kicked my butt left, right, 3 ways from Thursday, so many times, through just simply standing and holding a posture. So I teach several things, but the Qigong and the Bagua are the primary ones.
Thank you, Kelly. Samar says, how can you keep grounded when your kids are fist fighting and banging holes in walls? Those teenage years were hell, and then you try to stop them and they scream mean names at you. For me, thankfully this time has passed, but my friends are going through this with their kids. So, violence in children. Travis, you want to take this? And then we move.
I always think it's funny. As someone who has no children of my own, I don't know how much credibility I have, but I'll give it a shot. I have had partners with children, but it's an interesting one. You know, for me, I get along with children by and large so well, and I can usually find there's such a kid in me. I can usually, you know, and I also, well, there's two parts of it. One is I've got a lot of kid in me, so I'm always excited to be able to be a kid with kids of all ages. And the other part is I love treating children or people, all people of different ages, like the fully capable human beings that they are. And so I think a lot of times children get treated kind of like second-class citizens, or they get treated a little differently because they're younger. And it's amazing the kind of responsiveness in my limited experience. I'm not a parent, but in my limited experience, when I'm real with people of all ages and treat them like fully capable human beings and connect with them on that kind of level, almost like you would with an adult, it's amazing the degree of maturity that they can reflect back to you and how much they respect that, and appreciate that and want that. And in my limited experience too, you know, it's, I can get into a groove with kids younger, and I haven't had experience with teenagers where I'm in a parent role. So I've only been kind of like up to age 10, really. But what was I going to say is that totally spaced what I was going to say there. So maybe I'll just leave off there, though. You know, I think, but just, you know, finding, I guess that's what it was, is just that, you know, providing a sense of stability and structure, and modeling what it means to be in charge, because I really like for parents to be in charge. They're teaching children how to grow up and be in charge. It's a respectful way to be, to go, hey, these are the rules, these are the boundaries, you can test them. You know, if you cross the line, I'm not going to be a jerk about it, but I'm going to come every time and remind you, here's where the line is, this is how it goes. And so, you know, being able to establish boundaries and maintain them, because children are as good as anybody, maybe better than most, at testing those boundaries repeatedly, going, is that boundary here today? Is that boundary here an hour later? They'll run all over you if you let them. So if you can figure out that where you want those boundaries to be, and if it's a way that's healthy and respectful of all parties involved, it's not honoring someone any more or less because they're older or younger, but offering everybody involved the same honor that they deserve, then you're going to win the respect of kids, and you're going to be more likely, they're still going to act up. They're still going to be wild and crazy because they're children and they're learning and being wild. They're supposed to be kind of wild, I think, but I think you're going to get more respect and more responsiveness and be able to kind of like, you know, corral them a little bit more. So yeah, I'll leave off there.
So have the courage from presence to set the boundaries and be fearless about the boundary.
Yeah.
I feel, especially younger parents, Eileen is a school teacher, so she's going to be a different kind of parent. But a lot of young parents, I feel, give a lot of latitude to their kids. I see them in restaurants as well, where we were asked to just sit and be in a chair. I see kids running around, banging on things, right? Little kids, where when we were the same age, when we were 5, 6, 7, we were asked to sit in a chair and we sat, right? That was the boundary.
Yep.
And we minded the boundary. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Travis. Kelly, anything come up for you? And I'll come back to the teacher who's going to have lots of wisdom around children. So go ahead, Kelly.
Well, I don't have any kids of my own either. I do have a partner with 4. But I also spent 5 years, almost 6 years working in a youth home, in a level 5 youth home. So that's highest risk, highest violence, highest incidence of things. And one of the best things that I found, and Travis, again, I completely agree with you. I'm a big kid at heart myself. I love being able to play with kids and be a kid and, you know, get on that level with teenagers. And that was one of the things that really benefited my presence in the youth home, and, you know, kind of confused the kids at first because I wasn't like the other adults. I would actually talk to them about the stuff that they like because I like comic books, you know, games, this, that, and the other thing. I grew up, you know, a gamer. That's one of the things that got me into the martial arts and got me training so much, is because it's like I could actually like learn this stuff for real, right? So being in the youth home, having the patience and the courage to not respond in anger, to not reflect anger back, to not foster anger or judgment or fear in the individual that you are communicating with. And one of the big things that I noticed, and a couple times I met families of individuals that I was working with, and seeing how much anger and fear was in the whole family dynamic, the words that they would use and the interactions and how verbally abusive it was just like, okay, all right, note to self, do not engage. Like, just seeing how people just get like triggered left, right, and center. From my personal experience in that milieu, plus also being the oldest cousin in my family by about 11 years and dealing with kids and being the designated babysitter whenever I came over, I never ever wanted to be angry or trigger anyone that I was ever working with or being with my family in a way that caused them to be angry with me or scared. I mean, there's a difference between tough love, which is very required. Travis, as you said, here's the line. Consequences. Here's the line again. Consequences. Simple math. Very, very simple, very effective. And when you do it in a way that is actually loving and respectful, it's way more effective and way more supportive of actual conversation and dialogue. And that's yeah, like Travis, you said it, line, consequence, respectful communication, non-violent communication. Always works. Sometimes hard at first to get there, but in my experience, it's always worked.
So what I'm hearing you say is, if they were having a fist fight and creating holes in the walls, what is the vibrational energy in us that created that? What condition pattern did the kid pick up from us?
Yeah, what are we supporting?
At some point in time, we had a heavy pain body. Like the parents or the family members around that kid had a heavy pain body, that now, one, they're not setting the boundaries on the kid. So allow this spaciousness when they were children, give them, allow them spaciousness, as Eckhart says, right? Give them presence. Maybe they were not given presence. And now, especially if they were boys, boys have a certain amount of aggression. If you didn't allow that aggression to express itself correctly, like, even an animal, like, I go by like this man-made pond, and there's a duck with its little babies. And when you go close to the babies, the duck stiffens up and acts bigger, right? It's such a small, tiny thing. And I'm like, whatever, 5 feet, but it's such a tiny thing, but it's going to stand up and show its aggression. So instead of expressing aggression correctly, we don't show them how to express the aggression. And that's where, they would probably do better with Taekwondo or some kind of martial arts if they were boys, and having boys in sports. That's what trains them. Wrestling. All of those are very disciplined sports, and that'll drain them of their energy, right?
Yep.
You're not letting their adrenaline, and especially hormonal changes, have compassion for their hormonal changes. It's okay for them to fist fight. I mean, they're boys, right? And look at the violence. What are they picking up from? We are talking about conditioned patterns. Look at the conditioned patterns of society right now. Look at the violence in movies, in TV shows. So what are they going to pick up? That's what they're going to pick up. So thank you, Kelly, for that. And here comes the teacher.
Oh, it's funny. Well, a couple of things I wanted to say. So Samara actually commented again, saying she wanted to make sure that she pointed out that she was talking about teenage boys. And also,
which we need to address teenage boys, right? So,
and then she had said that she agreed with the boundaries, but that both parents have to be on the same page. And that was a big part of the issue she had mentioned, which my initial reaction is, yes, I agree, because that's kind of where my mind was before. But now I've come to realize that although you would think you need to have them both on the same page, you can it can turn into the one side, I'll say, myself, feeling like I have expectations of the other side and trying to then control the other parent, and that other parent should then be parenting the same way as me. And then that creates more
stress,
more suffering for everyone. And then also that lowering of the energy. And so that's not something that's going to lead to peace. It's not something that's going to lead to a raising of vibrational energy by pointing out the fact that the two sides don't see it the same way. So it's more focusing on yourself. And so for me, I think I've brought this up a couple of times. For me, what I've done is when it's chaos, now I don't have like quite a teenager, he's only 11, but it's chaos here. What I do is I have to use what Kelly brought up, using that space, using that, even if it's a fraction of a second, that space in between what happens and how I respond, and try to make it not responding reactively, but instead, what is the response? And sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes it is a reaction, and then I have to come back to that afterwards and explain how that was not how it should have been. But sometimes I can come at it proactively and things go well, or sometimes I can't do it in that moment, but I know that I can't do it and I have to leave. And so then I leave and I go and I do meditation in another space where that's not at. And when I come back, 9 times out of 10, it's dissolved. Just by me meditating, me focusing on me has dissolved it for everyone in the house. And so I think the more we can focus on present moment within ourselves, the more that will help all of those that are around us. I try to explain to my family, it doesn't mean that you like what it is that they're doing. You don't like that they just punched a hole in the wall. It's not saying that you like it. It's just saying that I'm choosing to be present and choosing not to react and almost contribute to the madness in your reaction. And so that's kind of some things that I have kind of thought of, not only in my experiences, but some of the things that have been said, although she's just added 2 more comments that I haven't read yet.
Thank you, Eileen. That's perfectly said, because I feel the parents start to expect, like when the fight is going on, that it shouldn't be happening, instead of moving into a state of acceptance. Yes, they're having a fist fight, they'll resolve
Exactly.
They'll resolve it on their own, leave them be. The expectation is this should not be happening, right? And once we say that's non-acceptance, so you're not learning your spiritual, the teenager is teaching you a spiritual lesson of acceptance of what is.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that they should not be fist fighting. So Samar, the lesson here is they should be, because why should they be fist fighting? Because they are in that present moment.
You're accepting the present moment. It's what's
Loving
happening.
what is. Loving what is.
Being grateful for all of it. Everything.
Yes. Thank you, Eileen, for that lesson.
Welcome.
So we'll take one last question because it's almost an hour and a half. Kimberly says, I'm grieving some past forgotten unconscious actions. The memories came back suddenly. I've come into grief and I will stay here for a little while because I'm healing the grief by allowing the burning in my heart center. I'm okay if it takes forever. I'm grateful to be able to see it and wish well to those I've harmed. So there's awareness here that she's harmed. Okay. Have you read the question, Kelly? Are you ready to respond to it? And then
Sure.
We'll ask Travis and Eileen and end at that because it's late. I know it's very late for Eileen. She's on the East Coast. So thank you.
Grieving is one of the most important spaces to walk through. When we realize how our past belief systems, how our choices have impacted ourselves and those around us, when we're unconscious, when we realize that how unconscious we were in the past and how that's affected our lives, it is really important to grieve and to let yourself feel that space. And it's important also to not let yourself wallow or get yourself hijacked into beating yourself up because of past actions. When you're present and you're being emotionally responsible and present, grieving is a totally natural and fluid thing. And it comes and goes. And that's wonderful that you have gotten to this insight and that you are letting yourself grieve, because that is a beautiful thing. And as much as it can be very uncomfortable and a very sad space, being able to look inward and feel your grief and feel the sadness because you realize how much you've changed and how you hindsight is 20/20. Hindsight is always 20/20, or sometimes it's 50/20. It's sort of one of those things where you go, really, what the heck, universe? So accepting that you have changed, accepting that there is grief, accepting that there is sadness is a very, very powerful healing space. Very powerful. And for me, I have been through many, many spaces of grief. Most notably, you know, when grandparents that I loved died, when my marriage ended, and the grief that I felt realizing what I had done to myself, what I'd done to my friends, what I'd done to my family to try and keep this relationship that, you know, as thorough and as deep a profound learning experience and training ground it was not healthy, you know, and actually accepting the fact that I had made choices that were not healthy and how they had harmed me, and by, you know, association, my family and my relationships with a lot of really good friends. It was hard, and I had to let myself grieve, and I spent, you know, months crying on and off. And it was also a great learning experience of how to actually be vulnerable with myself and to find strength in that vulnerability by letting myself grieve, and finding the strength in letting myself feel everything that had happened instead of pushing it away, shelving it, or bottling it up. There is profound, incredible strength in letting yourself feel everything that has happened. And yeah, tears wash the soul clean.
Thank you, Kelly. Feel and experience that emotion completely and fully.
Fully in now.
Thank you. Travis, anything come up for you on their question that they did something unconscious in the past and are grieving it now? Thank you.
Yeah. I agree with everything Kelly was just saying. And I, you know, again, in my own experience, with the previous breakup that I went through and everything around that and the context of my life, I'd never had anything matter to me so much in my life. There was so much around it, and the way that it all fell apart was just so devastating. It was the most devastating thing I had ever gone through. And then my whole world fell apart, you know. So I've spent about the last year or so really grieving, through the most difficult grief I've ever been through. And my experience is that it happens in cycles and in waves. It's not a linear thing. And so, and I think, you know, kind of in line with what Kelly was saying, or at least what I think I was getting out of what you were saying, Kelly, is you want to allow yourself to grieve and feel fully, but you don't want to overdo it either. And you have to find that where that line is a real delicate thing. It requires, I think, a lot of presence and honesty with oneself to not overindulge in it. But also to allow oneself to really fully feel it. And so, that's another, I think, key point to note. And then, you know, another thing that I feel like is really helpful for me is having those healthy habits, healthy practices. I know there were times I was so crippled by my grief. You know, a lot of my healthy habits had fallen by the wayside, and I'd even fallen back into some less healthy habits that I thought I had left behind me. And just going for a walk in the woods in the morning, just that simple walk was enough to start getting things moving back in the right direction when I was just so taken over by that pain. So to have healthy practices and healthy habits, a place of belonging, people you can connect with. It's good to know who you can rely on and who your support system is, and take advantage of that and utilize that in those very painful times. Because if you need the support, I think, and you're ready to accept the support and the love and help of others, it'll show up in some form or other through some people, whether they're your family or friends or new people that come to you. But that's a really important thing, to rely on that support when you're going through those really painful times. And then I guess lastly, I'll just say that my heart goes out to you, because I think the most painful part about any of these things is knowing, for me, is when I know that I've hurt others, and I know that I've acted unconsciously, and I've done things that aren't in line with how I want. And it's so easy to just beat yourself up over that. But just to know that this is something that I don't know anybody who hasn't done that. I don't know anybody who doesn't do that in some form or other. It's just important to have a lot of love and space and tenderness with oneself for making mistakes that hurt or harm others. We have to forgive ourselves, and that can be really hard, but but we all do it. So unless or until we get to some point where we don't, which is great. So
thank you, Travis. So find some healthy habits and just use them as a guide to get you out of the grief. Whether it is eating right for a week or so, try and eat clean. And then go for your walk, move your body, right? Do some meditation, commune with nature, sit in nature. Even if you cannot go for a walk, just sit outside in your patio or an open space and just sit there, right? Or stand there, whatever you may have. Even if it means standing in a parking lot, just stand there and experience it. Eckhart has a sweet way of saying he loves the rain. So he used to drive miles and miles away, and he had a very cheap Russian car. So I can just imagine him in a box-like little Russian car. And he said he would drive and drive and drive and then stop and just sit in his car and watch the rain fall on his car. And that was his meditation. Like for hours, just sit there in his car watching the rain. So he, again, back to the exemplary, he's exemplary in the way he executes himself, right? Presence is the key. Thank you, Travis, for that. Good. Eileen, anything come up for you on grieving? Unconscious action.
Yeah. I wasn't going to really add too much onto grieving and unconscious action, actually. But someone had added a comment afterwards about grieving the loss of her father last year, and now her mother's funeral was yesterday. And I do have a, yeah, I know.
Sorry to hear that.
I do have a lot of experience with grief, especially over the last about the last 3 years. And I just wanted to comment quickly before we sign off that for me, I've learned sitting with the grief and allowing the grief to be there, like giving it space, allowing it to come. It's helpful, but in this last year, I've learned more so than that, like accepting everything that is, even if it means death, like accepting everything has extremely helped me as well. And so I feel like each experience I've had over the last year with death, which, believe it or not, is a lot, has been a little bit easier, a little bit more peaceful. And so I think that, I don't remember what chapter it was in The Power of Now, but one of them talks about the being and how, so even in death, when, you know, that form has left, that the spirit is still there, which I've kind of always believed anyway, but and so it's kind of like, yeah, this is, you know, this is what was meant to be, and this person who's now not with me in form doesn't mean that their spirit isn't with me. That I mean, we're all here. And so that has really helped me over the last like 8-9 months deal with a lot of things, and my children as well. So
thank you for sharing that, Eileen. And what I would say to the person that lost their parent, and that's the tie in into, we've been talking a lot about demystifying death, debunking death. And it happens a lot of times that when two partners, when a mother passes away, like a wife passes away, then the father or the husband will pass away within the span of 5 to 6 months. My best friend's mom passed away maybe last year. I had her go visit India. She had Alzheimer's, so I asked her to go, like, this would be your last chance. Because I already know Alzheimer's because of Eckhart's teachings, right? Alzheimer's means the consciousness is withdrawing, right? So you don't know whether you're going to have a month with them or you're going to have 6 months with them. But then her father passed away within 5 or 6 months of that. So it's not uncommon for this event to occur. That shows how tied, how intertwined our interconnectedness of the non-physical aspect of us is those two souls that were here with that soul contract. We've talked about the soul contract. Their soul contract is over and they say, okay, I'm going to drop this coat and return to the one consciousness, right? I'm done with this lesson of this lifetime, especially if they are. The one thing she said was she was grieving an unconscious action. Now, one of the things is to have the state of acceptance that Eileen is talking about, that nobody can act beyond their level of consciousness, even us, including us. I mean, if you go look, I may have been unconscious, so unconscious 10 years back or 15 years back or 20 years back, right? We all repeat the conditioned patterns of our society. So the one thing I would say is don't grieve your unconscious action, move into a state of acceptance of your unconscious action that you couldn't have done. In Stillness Speaks, he says, if you were to go through what she went through, if you had the same experiences that she had, you would do and act exactly like she did, right? There's some little excerpt I sometimes posted as well. So you would, even if I were in your spot, I would do exactly the same unconscious action. That's the compassion we have to have, and no guilt. Don't say that you will never get over the grief of the unconscious action, because guilt is our ego keeping itself alive, right? Just think, you're thinking a thought of guilt and you're identified, you're back identified, you need to create the gap. You need to have the gap of consciousness saying, I accept that I had this unconscious action and that is okay. But now that I know of my awareness, that I know that that is in, I have the awareness, I'm so powerful now. And this, that's the power. The presence is in the now. Like Travis had said at the start of this talk, please visit the start of the talk about the power of this now, right? This present moment, I know that I'm not gonna act like that anymore. See what lesson was that life situation presenting to you. Have gratitude for it, that it taught you not to do what you did at that moment. That's what I would say. As always, it has been incredibly amazing. Kelly, Travis, Eileen, deeply humbled, deeply from my bottom of my heart, down to my knees in humility and gratitude. Thank you so much to all of you. We'll see you all next week and on Wednesday again, and have a fantastic week. Many blessings. Bye. Good night.
All right.
Good morning. Bye.